Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and people seem to like these little philosophical discussions, so I'll record another one here. I'm sitting in the Walmart parking lot. The family's inside giving them a bit of business, and we're on our way ice skating, doing some winter outings. So I'll take a few minutes here to talk about some more ACAAN related stuff based on some of the comments that I've gotten in the last video. So the first thing that comes up there is the idea that with ACAAN, the spectators get the credit, whereas with other revelations, even though they might be 1 chance in 52, the magician takes the credit. Well, I take issue with that in that there are many revelations out there that give, by that measure, the spectator credit, right? The spectator cuts to the card, the spectator places a card into the deck and it finds its mate, right? The Gemini twins thing or similar kinds of effects. There are many kinds of revelations where the spectator essentially could get the credit. But I want to suggest that really there's never a case where the spectator gets the credit, not really. We like to talk about that in terms of presentation, that it's good to give the spectator credit, and that's a nice thing to do, and that's something that is great in the spectators, excuse me, in their experience. I apologize, I'm getting over a cold here, so I'm a little bit of coughing. But the reality is that the magician always is responsible for soliciting the experience. So even when you have something like a pure Burglas effect kind of ACAAN where, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what are the rules? And I know there's many videos about this, but I want to really break it down to the simplest form. But whenever you have this moment where there's a deck sitting out in the open, the spectator names a number, another one names a card, and then someone else deals and all this stuff, you could say that it's the spectators that are responsible for it, but it's the magician who solicits the moment. Remember what the contract is. The magician is not working in probability. The magician is, whether it's said overtly or whether it goes unsaid, it's understood that the magician is saying that this is going to happen right now. And who gets credit for that? Well, the magician gets credit for that. You can't really get around that. You can say that you're giving credit to the spectator, but really the magician is responsible for the experience. They're the ones that solicit the involvement. They set the ground rules. They explain what's going to happen. They lead, the moment. So never does a spectator approach a magician and say, "Hey, let me show you something." That's not how they work. So just at its fundamental philosophical level, the spectator never really gets credit. Even when a magician does that, at the end of it, the applause comes back on the spectator, or back on the magician. It's the magician's performance. It is their moment that they have set up and organized. They are, they're the caretakers of that situation. Second thing I want to address is the rules. There's a lot of debate about, well, whose rules are you following when it comes to the Burglas effect, right? The Holy Grail kind of ACAAN. There's really only 2 rules, right? And that is on the assumption that the deck is sitting there in the open. So if the presentation begins and there is one deck of cards sitting out in the open, there's only 2 rules. There's not 5, there's not 4, there's not 6, there's not 8, there's only 2. Rule number 1 is that the spectators make free selections. That's rule number 1. And rule number 2 is that the magician doesn't touch the deck. Those are the only 2 rules. There is no requirement that the deck be shuffled. There's no requirement really, and I know I've talked about this before and listed more than 2, but really there's only 2. There's no requirement that the cards be dealt face up. It's good programming to do some of those things, right, in terms of the experience and the presentation of it. But by the limitations of the method, there's only those 2 things. Free selections, and the performer does not touch the deck of cards. You could add some more if the cards are not in play at the beginning. There are only some accounts of people like David Burglas doing this, where he asks the questions. There's free choice for the card and the number, and then he says, okay, reach in my bag or look in the back seat or whatever, you know, and take out this deck of cards. There's a couple where he says, he is purported to have said, there's a bowl full of cards, right? Take a deck out of that bowl of cards, of decks, that bowl of you know, closed card boxes, and then deal down on that one to your card. There are also times when he says top or bottom. Would you like to deal from the top or the bottom? Apart from those instances, as long as the deck is in full play from the very beginning and is seen, there's only two rules, right? And the reason why that is because if there are free selections, it doesn't matter if the deck is shuffled. The deck could be in new deck order. And being that there's free selections, the spectators could choose the new deck order position or not. They have free choice. They can choose anything. It doesn't matter what order the cards are in. It is still 1 chance in 52. So a pre-revelation shuffle is not essential. So you don't have to have that. Also, if the performer does not touch the deck of cards, that means that a spectator is dealing. And in programming, that is essentially the same thing as inspection. If the spectator is dealing the cards, then the cards must be clean. That's the end conclusion. They don't have to be. We know that, but they must be. That is the assumption. So they don't have to be dealt face up. They don't. That's why there's some really good variations where the cards are spread on the table and a spectator fingers, you know, one side to the other. They just count the cards from a spread, and it's considered clean. And of course, the cards could be shown face up at the end, and you can see that they're all different. There is no requisite there. All you need are the two things: free selections. Magician doesn't touch the deck, and you've achieved it. So any other rule that you put on it is really a redundancy that falls in one of those two categories. It's just a furthering proof of that already required rule that free selections exists and the performer doesn't touch the deck. So there's a lot of arguments that can be had over this, but it's really simple stuff. I mean, it's not as complicated as we make it. And again, I still rely on what I said in the last video. It comes down to the performer's presentation. It comes down, that's really the critique, is what is the performer doing in the moment. Every trick functions on equivoque, whether it does or not. If the performer is not saying exactly what's going to be happening, then there's always the out that the performer can change what is going to happen. The worst presentation is actually the best, in that the performer that says, I'm going to do this and this is what's going to happen, it's a big no-no in magic presentation. You're not supposed to do that. But actually, that is the most locked-in way to prove that you've done something amazing, you see. So another thing to keep in mind is the idea of explaining what's going to happen before it happens. And with the Burglass effect, that kind of is there. I ask for a card, I ask for a number, it's quite self-explanatory what's going to happen, and it has a certainty. Likewise, if you have multiple outs on that scenario, then that's a method, right? So just some more thoughts on that. I know that some people will push back on me, but it's just simple. It's simple stuff. So good luck with that. Happy magicking.